Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of an Evolved Review. I'm your host, James Caleb Kitchens. I'm joined each and every week by none other than Caleb Stovall, the man who consumes more wrestling content than anyone in the known multiverse. But tonight it's Dark Side of the Ring. It's Dark Side of the Ring Season 3, Episode 3. It is the episode about none other than Nick fucking Gage. And joining us here, straight from Suplexes and Microphones, none other than Joseph Brown. Welcome back, man.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Guys, Dark Side of the Ring is our bread and butter. As a matter of fact, Joe, you were on our most popular episode ever, so maybe you're the ratings guy here, which is the Bruiser Brody episode.
Nice. Good to know.
Yeah, man. That, as a matter of fact, I mean, that episode, I think it's got maybe 2,000 views on YouTube only.
Oh, wow.
And it's and it has the most comments. I mean, there's people comment on the episode all the time.
Wow. Good. That's awesome.
So, but today we are talking about, of course, Dark Side of the Ring, Season 3, Episode 3, Nick Gage, MDK, Murder, Death, Kill. I want to start off with a question to both of you. And guest privilege, Joe, you can go first. Is this the wildest episode of Dark Side of the Ring? And I know that's a multi-layered question.
Yeah, it is. In some ways it definitely is. Nick Gage, apparently there's no boundaries with this guy. So it was definitely an interesting episode. I didn't know a lot about Nick Gage prior to this, just a little bit. But it was wild, that's for sure. Stovall, what do you think?
Yeah, I think with all of the horror music playing in the background with all of these deathmatch wrestling clips should tell it all. Yeah, this one was pretty wild. But I gotta say, at first when I started it, I kind of was like, all right, I'm not gonna like this after a while. But literally 5 minutes in, I was just like, I cannot turn this off. Like, I don't like these clips, but I can't look away. Like, it's like a bad car wreck, pretty much. I really like this episode. Spoiler alert.
It's something that, you know, Vice is so good at with Dark Side of the Ring is that they're going to tell you a story. And it doesn't really matter 100% of the time if you're interested in the subject matter or not. They're going to tell you a good story with what's there. And Nick Gage's life and career I think are incredibly interesting, whether, you know, you agree with the concept of deathmatch wrestling or not. I can't wait to hear what Cornette has to say about this one.
Oh, boy.
He's already spoken about it a little bit. Before we go too far into it, I do want to note, just to boast here for a second, that every single episode of Dark Side of the Ring so far this season has featured a viral pro wrestling performer. We had Brian Pillman Jr. in the first two episodes, and then Effie makes two appearances in this one.
Yeah, I saw Effie in there right at the beginning, actually.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Nick Gage gets, you know, as far as the people that Dark Side of the Ring focuses on and the people that we typically focus on this very podcast, I mean, you know, Nick Gage is kind of like down on the indie level. You know, he's not somebody that's nationally known. He is now, though, I think, after this episode.
Yeah, I definitely say so. I think his popularity is going to go up. You know, it's funny because, and sad note here, but we recently lost another Dark Side of the Ring subject matter in New Jack. And, you know, he died of a heart attack at the age of 58. And it's interesting because it seemed like with this Dark Side of the Ring episode that they did on him, he became more popular than he's ever been in his entire career, even though he has that controversial reputation, just like Nick Gage, kind of. You know, it seems as though they become more popular in this instance. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic, especially, you know, when we talk about what they do and stuff like that.
I would agree entirely on that. I mean, you know, you look at like Dark Side of the Ring in general and how many people it's pulling in. right? I mean, it's it's pulling in about 1 million viewers
Mm-hmm.
every episode, and there are episodes of AEW that don't pull that. There's episodes of NXT that don't pull that. And I mean, as far as like, you know, the time slot that it's in, there's episodes of Raw and SmackDown that don't pull that sometimes in that time slot.
Yep.
And so there, in a lot of ways, I mean, we talk about this a lot. I don't want to go too much into it, but a lot of the TV wrestling audience, AEW, WWE, a lot of those are the same audience, right? It's kind of the same people that are just like, I want to watch wrestling every day, and I just want to put it on, and you know, there being 7 wrestling shows on during the week isn't a problem for them. But it's kind of the same audience, and I don't think Vice. I think Vice draws some of those people, but I think a lot of the people that watch Vice may not, or watch Dark Side of the Ring specifically, they may not be 100% wrestling fans. They may not even like wrestling at all, but they just like the subculture of wrestling, which has developed sort of its own fandom, and we talk about that pretty often on here. But it is a phenomenon that I don't think we can ignore.
Yeah, well, I think that's because of the way that they shoot this. This isn't your typical wrestling documentaries or wrestling stories, even for that matter. Like, this doesn't really focus on wrestling. Yes, there's a wrestling aspect to it, but this is more of the human side of things. This is taking it outside of the characters and stuff like that. So this doesn't really focus on wrestling, which is why it attracts, a different type of audience while also attracting the wrestling audience. It's kind of like, what they tried to do and what they still try to do in the 90s and stuff like that. When in the Monday Night Wars, where they weren't just trying to attract the wrestling audience, they were also trying to attract the outside interest in wrestling and stuff like that. It's just this TV show has found the right formula for it.
People love tragedies. They love real life tragedies. That's why people watch First 48 and all those sorts of things as well. It's a similar thing. It's just a different genre of that, because all these guys happen to be in the wrestling business.
Very true. Very true. The murder mysteries, crime dramas, those sorts of things. I mean, they're huge. There's a massive fan base for those things.
Exactly.
One more general topic before we kind of dig into the meat and potatoes. Unfortunately, it's human meat in this episode. But what do you guys think about the way that Vice shoots these kind of compared to the other thing we've been covering heavily, which is the A&E biographies? It didn't really occur to me until I was rewatching this episode tonight just how different the two are, and the thing that I really noticed is like the A&E biography sort of focuses on these guys like they're these sort of like mythical, sort of larger than life characters, but everything on Vice is so like it's very gritty. The interviews are up close. You're in the person's face, and everybody's just kind of a person. Whether you're Nick Gage, you're Stone Cold Steve Austin, it doesn't matter. It's very gritty, and I think that's another thing that draws people to it as well.
Well, I think that they don't want to look anything like a WWE production.
Right.
They're basically making it known from the start that this is their own thing. And it's funny because if you talk to the creators of this, and I forget their names right off the top of my head, but the creators of this, they have the Dark Side of the podcast that airs the very next day after the show, which I listened to. And they love to joke about how if you saw those reenactment scenes and you saw them without the dark lighting and stuff like that, you would be like, what are these guys doing? This looks nothing like what it's supposed to look like. But since, they dark out the lighting and stuff like that and the way that they shoot it, it makes it look like it's, all of the characters look like they're supposed to and everything like that. So that's just kind of a funny side note about the reenactments. I love the reenactments, by the way.
Agreed.
especially some of them are hilarious. You know, we talk about the famous one with New Jack, with the guy at the very end in the wheelchair with all the cocaine on him, or the Herb Abrams reenactment of him, dying and stuff like that. So I love the reenactments and stuff like that. But I agree with you; it has a very grittier feel to it. Pretty much like you would see on Joe. You mentioned it, the first 48 and stuff like that. Like it feels like one of those shows.
Right.
Well, let's get into it.
I do like. I mean, I felt like I was a bigger fan of Moxley after this. He just seemed cool to me, talking about his matches with Nick Gage and how crazy he really was. Like you said, kind of treating them as people instead of performers for their interviews is really good.
And Moxley has the line of the century.
I don't know if I like Moxley more or less after this, just because I also have the knowledge that he is actually going to go have a death match with Nick Gage in the near future.
Yeah, he is, and I'm sorry, but I got to talk about that because I posted that on Facebook. I posted the moment where he challenged Nick Gage, and I'm sorry, but that is what wrestling is missing nowadays. I'm not talking about the death match stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the way that they did this, the way that they had Nick Gage in the ring, and then you had Moxley just come out and walk up and basically get in his face, and I'm just like, see. There's no gaga with any of this. There's no bullshit. It's just two badasses wanting to go at it and stuff like that. And that's what wrestling is missing. I'm sorry, but it just the way that they did it was just so good. And I'm not gonna lie, as much as I don't really like deathmatch wrestling and stuff like that, I kind of want to see that match.
That's fair. I mean, I can't lie. I kind of want to watch it too, but if I was Moxley, there's no way in hell I would do it, just because of the level that he's at, the stardom that he's got, the career he has. I mean, he literally could pull an Orton and phone it in for the next 10 years if he wanted to and make tons of cash doing it. I'm not saying he would do that or he wants to do that, and I just had to get a sly dig in there at Randy Orton.
You did,
but let's get into the details here. Talk about some of this stuff. I love the way they opened this episode because normally if they're doing a single episode about somebody, they always do like them as a kid, and then this is what I was into. I was into sports and this and that, and I like to do this on the weekends, and then this is how I got into wrestling, and this is who trained me. They did not do that at all with this episode. They went right for it. We're going to grab your attention. We're going to show you how absolutely insane Nick Gage is right off the rip. We're going to fill it with tons of clips from these death matches. We're going to talk about, basically, they go through all the death match stuff. They have Moxley, who's a familiar face there, and then they go right into the really infamous incident with the Tournament of Death, which we'll touch on that in a minute. And then they sort of peel it back and start talking about his life and everything. What did you guys think about the way that they did this and the way they structured this episode?
You're right. It's an attention grabber for sure. Right out the gate, even somebody just flipping channels, they see the blood and guts. Okay, what's this? They might not even be watching these on a regular or care about wrestling or Nick Gage or whatever, and they're like, okay, let's watch a few more minutes of this, and they're hooked at that point. That, like Stovall said, car wreck, you can't look away. So I think they did it right for this particular episode for sure. I don't think they want you to necessarily have any sort of empathy for Nick Gage. I don't think they're presenting it that way.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we talk about John Moxley and him being in there. I think that he is a crucial part to being in this story because not only has he wrestled with Nick Gage, he's a familiar face with the wrestling audience. There's probably a lot of the wrestling audience that doesn't know who Nick Gage is or even the mainstream audience, but they know the name Jon Moxley. They know who he is, and they're like, and as you saw, they had the clip of him in AEW, and right off the bat, people go, "Oh, he's in AEW," you know, kind of thing. So he's a very crucial part into leading in that story, and he's a good, I think, guide to have explain what deathmatch wrestling is, because obviously you could tell he loves it. And Moxley is one of those rare cases where he can do it all. He can not only do the death match and the violence, the hardcore wrestling, but he can also have, you know, regular matches. He can do it all in wrestling. So he's just a fan of wrestling. So he was really that perfect guy to really tell you about the death match wrestling and stuff like that. And then, yeah, I really like the way that they opened this up with Nick Gage talking about the deathmatch wrestling, like you said, and stuff like that. And I think it was really good to start it off that way, because it really grabs your attention right off the bat. And I was not expecting the story to go that way too. Like I'm thinking, all right, well, he probably went too far or something like that. I didn't expect the thing to start off with, oh yeah, by the way, he died and everything and was brought back to life. I went, wait, what? Like that was not where I was going with it, and or where I thought that it was going with. And then what I thought was really interesting was the scene where he's in the back and the people are like trying to stitch him up, and he is insisting. He's like, no, just tape this up and let me walk back out there and stuff like that. And I did want to mention this part as well. The guy that he's wrestling, Thumbtack Jack, that should tell you all you need to know about deathmatch wrestling right there. Especially when I saw the guy walk out, I was like, what the hell? This looks like a horror movie character pretty much.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I mean, you know, the Tournament of Death is it's a thing, and you know, I was familiar with it a little bit. You know, it's kind of a urban legend, kind of like Nick Gage is to you know, and this particular match, I mean, has made its rounds on the internet ever since it actually happened. And it's just insane that the guy bled out to the point where he legally died for 7 minutes. I mean, it begs the question: can Nick Gage be killed? You know, is he some immortal creature that roams the earth, hitting people with light bulbs? You know.
I don't know, but that was a crazy way to start off the episode. You know, it was like last time on the Pillman episode where with Pillman, it was, oh yeah, he had this bright, you know, promising future and whatnot, blah, blah, blah. It could have been all this, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, his ex-wife gets stabbed in the face. Like, it's like, oh, we're going there already. Okay. So it's like with this episode, it's like, oh, so we're going here now. So we're going with death and then resurrection. All right.
You know, Thumbtack Jack was probably like, man, I threw that guy through one set of ropes with light bulbs in it, and he had to go to the hospital. What a pussy.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the speakers here in the episode before we go further. This is a very focused episode from a, you know, from the point of like guest speakers that they had on. There's only 4 really. You have Jon Moxley, we already talked about at length. Brett Lauderdale, who is the owner of Game Changer Wrestling.
Yes.
Joe, what did you think about Brett?
Well, I'll say this. It seems like he'll do anything for Nick Gage. I mean, I'll give him some credit there. He you know, kind of backed his guy pretty much most of the way through this, kept giving him opportunities. Because Nick Gage, he screwed up a few times. But, you know, he's a little different cat, but that's the one thing that stood out to me. He was basically holding the guy's spot while he was in prison. He had plans for this dude even while the guy was behind bars for 4 years. So I'll give him the loyalty check for that one for sure.
Well, he definitely knew. I think Nick Gage was probably a big draw for him. I mean, Game Changer Wrestling has come a long way. I mean, they did a ton of events at Overmania weekend. They've had some big matches out there. I mean, they do a lot of stuff. A lot of people that we know have wrestled for Game Changer Wrestling. So yeah, I mean, somebody has to be really special if you're the owner slash promoter, whatever, and they go to jail, and you're like, man, in 5 years when that guy gets out, I got a really awesome storyline that I'm gonna have prepped up for him.
Right.
I mean, the dedication you have to have, the amount of potential you have to see in somebody to still have their back after all the shit that Nick Gage could have and probably did get Brett Lauderdale and Game Changer Wrestling into.
Right.
It's impressive.
Yeah, and we mentioned people that we know that have wrestled for Game Changer Wrestling. I believe that's the same promotion that sponsored Effie's thing. Effie's, what was it, Gay Brunch or something like that?
Effie's Big Gay Brunch, yep.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, they also, I believe, Young Professors classroom thing that he had was involved with them somehow. Like they were like a co-sponsor of it or
And
something like that.
Joey Janela's Spring Break works with GCW.
Maybe so. Fuck Joey Janela. Anyway, the next person was Sandra, which is his Nick Gage's girlfriend. I thought that her insight here was really interesting. She seems like a very interesting person. Like, I would want to have a conversation with her. Not for very long, maybe about 15, 20 minutes. But I definitely want to talk to this person. Caleb, what did you think about Sandra in this episode?
I thought that she's definitely very loyal to Nick Gage. She really loves him. For her to want to just stick around like that and through all that bullshit that he's been through, I mean, good Lord. I'm surprised she didn't leave him when he pulled that stupid shit to go to jail in the first place. That we'll talk about more coming up here. But I'm surprised she didn't leave him like right off the bat there. So yeah, she seemed interesting. I thought that she kind of exaggerated. Well, I guess maybe not. I thought it was maybe a little bit more exaggerated about how many fan letters and like how many fans he actually touched and stuff like that. But I could be wrong. Maybe he did touch a lot of people and stuff like that. Because I mean, Brett did show like the big, huge stack of mail that he had, and I know we'll probably go over that. But I found Sandra to like you said be really interesting. I kind of wanted to know more about her at times than I did Nick Gage. Not from like the whole thing, but just more about like what was her thoughts at the time, because she really didn't say like what her thoughts were when he went to jail. You get what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
she didn't say that she was so angry with him or that she was sad or whatnot. It's just, oh yeah, that happened, and then I was there when he was released, basically.
Yeah, really the only time she goes into that is when he does like the fire spot or whatever.
Yeah,
where she talks about that she was upset about it, or she asked him not to do it, and he told her he wasn't going to. That was like really the only time, and I'm kind of with you. I kind of want to know like what was her thought process as like A, B, C happened. When he died for 7 minutes, things like that. What was your impression of her, Joe?
That's definitely his ride or die. Stovall just said loyal. We mentioned Game Changer Wrestling guy being loyal, and it goes back to his ability to connect with people probably. And the character your wrestling character is supposed to be a exaggerated version of you, and that's maybe he just attracts people in some sort of way. I bet his inner circle is very small though. but regardless, the ones that are there, these ones folks writing letters to him, it's just all the same. They're just very loyal to him. He creates that loyalty.
From what I have been told by several people in the wrestling business that know Nick Gage, and what Moxley says here in the episode, I don't think Nick Gage's wrestling personality is him turned up to 100. I think it's just him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I think it's turned up already. I think he's already turned up to 100. All the time. Probably. But I want to talk before we go further. We did have one more person that was a frequent speaker in this episode, and that was David Arquette.
Former WCW champion David Arquette.
Yeah, I guess I should have mentioned that. I don't know why it would have slipped my mind. But yes, former WCW champion David Arquette, who is honestly probably the most famous person in this episode. We'll definitely get into that towards the end, but I thought that David Arquette was really entertaining when he was speaking, because it's like he was really laid back for somebody who was talking about that time Nick Gage kicked his ass. It's been a while, but he was. I think he takes the whole WCW title reign less seriously than we do.
Yeah.
Well, I also think that at times David Arquette gets unfairly punished for that, because
he didn't book it.
Exactly.
Right.
He didn't book it. It was one bro who booked that and stuff like that. And the argument that I always hear was the next day there was a front page cover in the Entertainment or magazine or whatever of David Arquette. And I said, okay, that may be true. However, what happened afterwards, Vince? Did it go anywhere else after that? No, it did not. So your logic is stupid, but that's a different story. But I think David Arquette, though, like I said, gets unfairly punished for that, because it wasn't his fault. He just went along with it. And in fact, if you actually talk to him, he really didn't want to do it, to be quite honest. He kind of wanted to not do that. But he went along with it, and so did everyone else. So, but I don't know. He just seemed kind of like a really cool guy in this episode. I just kind of thought.
I want to note that how the hell does Eric Bischoff look older in those 20-year-old clips than he does today? Because he really did. I mean, I guess he colors his hair now, but he had the full head of gray. But he just, I guess at that point in his life, must have just been really miserable, because he was
working Russo every day.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably look like shit too if I was working with Vince Russo every day. But the guy honestly, he looked better in the Savage documentary than he did in those clips that he showed, and those are from 2000.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's wild what working with Vince Russo every day will do to you, I suppose.
Exactly.
Well, to the way he talks about Vince Russo.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So at this point in time, after we've gone through the, he almost legally died, or he did legally die for 7 minutes. Then they kind of peel it back, and they talk about how him and his brother, Justice Payne, started off in CZW. It was so outlandish that ECW thought it was crazy. And, they talk about him watching Saturday Night Main Event at his dad's house. And I'll be honest, I didn't really know the story about his brother. So I'm thinking, at this point, I'm like, okay, his brother hasn't appeared in the documentary yet. This is an episode of Dark Side of the Ring. That means he either still hates his guts or he's dead. And it might be both. I mean, we really don't know. They never talk about them reconnecting or making up or anything like that. But they do talk about them breaking into the scene in CZW, and then eventually Game Changer Wrestling. And it seems like they had this kind of, this childhood dream to grow up and be pro wrestlers. They went about it kind of like the route of like the Hardy Boys. They're wrestling in the backyard and whatnot. But instead of it's interesting to see where your path can take you, because instead of ending up in WCW or ECW or any of these places, they ended up in CZW, and just started doing crazier and crazier shit. Joe, what do you think? What did you think about this part of it? Him and his brother like coming up in the business together.
It did remind me of the Hardys, kind of like you said, because these guys, it seems like they're pretty self-taught and started in the backyard. And although clearly, and they said this, they're influenced by death matches, ECW, and that sort of thing. And that's all they wanted to follow. I think these guys both knew that they were never going to be Kurt Angle, for example. They didn't have the skill or anything like that. So I don't know. That this is where they're finally trying to get you to have some empathy, I think, with the brother story. But like you said, they still achieved a dream, both of them. So, I mean, kudos to them.
Agreed. I mean, this is where they really wanted to go, and they both made it. I mean, this is kind of where we start to see sort of the degradation of Nick Gage. I mean, some of these clips where they start talking about him being on drugs all the time, he looks awful.
Yeah.
He looked absolutely terrible. You could tell he kind of gained weight. He wasn't taking care of himself. And I think the most telling clip here, and I'm going to get you guys' opinion on this, when they talk to Brett Lauderdale and they say, they talk about his addiction issues. They say, what percentage of his pay you think was going to drugs? And he says all of it, no doubt at all. He wasn't joking. He was being completely serious. This guy was coming in wrestling, using all his wrestling money to buy drugs. What did you think about that line, Caleb?
He was he didn't hold anything back in this episode about Nick, did he?
Not at all. And that's good. That's what you want.
Well, it is, but it just was interesting to me because it's but apparently these guys are such good friends. He goes out on a limb for Nick, basically, I guess. But yeah, I could definitely see that. I think even Nick and his girlfriend said it themselves that they weren't doing anything. They did not go to work. They were living with her mother, I think, and they didn't do anything. So so I'm pretty sure all of his money was going towards drugs and stuff like that. And it probably wasn't a lot of money. It was probably like $200 a match, if that. I guarantee you the Tournament of Death winning that thing, you probably didn't get paid that much to do it. So
probably not, man. You look at these audiences, and I mean, you do the math, and there's 200 people there at the most for most of these things.
And that's interesting because obviously CZW is going to draw in that kind of a crowd. I've never really liked CZW for that matter, but Game Changer Wrestling draws more of a crowd though today than CZW did.
Right, ever probably.
Yes, absolutely. But Game Changer Wrestling draws in a pretty big crowd. Probably, I would say, probably about as much as they did that PWX show that we went to. They probably draw in that majority of a crowd, all of their shows.
Yeah, they do a pretty good amount, I think, and they do a lot of events, and they do a lot of different type of events. So yeah, I mean they're a big deal. I mean they're not at the same level as like a NWA, Ring of Honor,
No.
MLW.
No,
but they draw decently, and they do, like I said, a lot of events.
And they have I think they get a lot of views on Fight TV.
Probably so, I would imagine. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't want to go see a death match in person, but I don't mind watching one on TV. I just don't want to be in the room when
Yeah.
the light bulbs and shit are going everywhere, you know?
I'll agree with that, but sometimes I can't help but watch some of those death matches, especially the ones in Japan that they talk about.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I like some of those, like especially with Mick Foley and Cactus Jack and Terry Funk.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll talk about this for a second. I think there's a clear difference between what Terry Funk and Cactus Jack were doing and what Nick Gage does. And I'm not just trying to shit on Nick Gage. I'm not trying to say that there's not an audience for what he's doing, because it's very easy to be a wrestling snob and be like, Nick Gage is not a fucking pro wrestler. That's not true. Nick Gage is a draw to an extent to a certain group of people, and he's obviously done pretty well. You know, he's got a lot of faith in him. He's got a Dark Side of the Ring episode about him.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that what he does, I don't think there's any technical excellence to it. It's not my cup of tea. But the man knows how to draw. He knows how to connect with an audience. I don't want to be in the ring with him, but shit, you know? But I don't think, I think what Terry Funk and Mick Foley were doing, though, they were death matches, but it was more along the lines of working, more along the lines of an art, the art form of wrestling. It was more controlled. They weren't out there actually trying to injure each other. I mean, they knew that they were going to get hurt, but I think there is a line between what Nick Gage considers as a death match and what Terry Funk and Mick Foley were doing.
I agree. Like Mick Foley and Terry Funk weren't, slamming light bulbs and stuff like that, which, I'm not surprised that he had the incident with the first light bulb incident, because I don't care how good you are at, choreographing that stuff or rigging it or whatnot. There's no way after about the fifth time that can end well. It just can't. I don't care if you have it perfectly set up in the ring for you to fall on. Like, you're breaking glass. Glass is going to do whatever it wants to do when it smashes. The pieces are going to go wherever they want to go. David Arquette finds that out later on in the episode. He didn't even get cut on the neck with Nick Gage doing it. He literally did it when he just turned around and one of the glasses just happened to, go up into his neck, basically. So, it's just, there's no way to do that safely after a while. I'm sorry. There's just none.
Yeah, I mean, two people throwing each other around a wrestling ring when they're both professionals, both athletes, both know what they're doing, is still insanely dangerous. Yeah. When you start adding steel chairs to it, it's more dangerous. When you start adding fluorescent light tubes to it, it's incredibly more dangerous. Wrestling's dangerous enough without tons of sharp objects in the ring.
Yeah.
So we get to this point. Nick Gage is down and out. His mom passes away, who he was very close to. They end up moving in with Sandra's mom. They get kicked out because nobody's working, and he's on drugs, and she probably was too. They don't say that in the episode, but I doubt he was just hanging out with this chick all the time and she was never partaking.
I'm sure.
They end up sneaking into Brett's house and crashing there. He kicks him out. It's 10 degrees out. So Nick Gage is like, fuck it, I'm going to rob a bank. And he tries one bank. He doesn't want to do it. He's like, no, I'm not going to do this. He pussies out is his term he uses. And then finally he goes and robs a bank. And for the most part kind of gets away with it, except for the fact that he's caught on camera without a mask. and it's very clearly this guy that you can just find on YouTube or whatnot. Joe, you have years and years and years of law enforcement experience. What do you think about this? Like, how long do you think it took them to figure out it was Nick Gage?
Couple hours. By the time he got to the casino and started spending the money, they probably like, oh yeah, we know who this is.
Do you think that the sentence he got, I think he got 5 years.
Super light.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I wanted to get your opinion on whether that was like something that was typical or not.
Yeah, it's super light. And most bank robberies go federal, and this one was a state sentence, which usually means you get out a lot earlier. Although this time he did do 85% of his sentence before he got out, which would be close to what he'd get in the federal system. But he would have gotten much more time in the federal system. So he was very fortunate to be prosecuted on the state level.
Well,
And
here's a question I have. Did his sentence get lighter because he turned himself in?
I mean, it's possible they took that in, as a piece of mitigation there, that they didn't have to chase him down 10 states away or something. But, he spent that money for a week. It was a full week that he was out there
Yeah.
balling at the casino. So there's that too. I don't know. Typically when these things happen, you have folks show. He didn't have a lot of folks, but you got folks show up saying, "Oh, it's because he was on drugs and he was desperate. He didn't have a job. His life's falling apart or whatever." Yeah, those things were probably taken in consideration. But yeah, 5-year sentence is light for a bank robbery.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, and I thought along the same lines as you, Caleb. That maybe they took into consideration he turned himself in. Maybe he didn't have a record prior to this. Lots of things there, but he does end up getting back out.
And by the way, does John Moxley not have the line of the century in the?
I love this where he's like, the guy wears a mask to the ring, so he looks like he just robbed a train. The one time he doesn't wear a fucking mask is when he robs a bank. I lost my mind.
Yeah. Well, if I can tell a war story here real quick, I worked a bank robbery in Warrenton, which Caleb, you're familiar with that area, and it was very similar. A guy with no criminal history, strung out on drugs, wanted some money. He goes to the only bank in Warrenton that I know of.
And I used to work there. Funny
really?
story.
Okay, so another connection there. He passes a note. They give him the money along with a die pack. He walks out of there, gets to his car, die pack explodes. He's got red ink all over him, right? He's from Savannah. He doesn't know how to get out of town. The cops caught him 5 minutes later, circling around, trying to find his way back to the interstate. He never even made it out of town with the money. It's these impulse things like this, and that's why Nick Gage didn't have a mask on, because it was an impulse thing, just like what this guy did.
Yeah.
But that guy got 15 years. So again, apples to apples here. The 5-year sentence, pretty light.
Not only did I grow up in Warrenton, Georgia, and I worked at that bank, and I was trained on how to use the die pack if somebody was to come in and rob the place. That is all hilarious to me, and I also can totally see how somebody who's not familiar with the area would have no idea how to get back to the interstate, because there is no clear. It's not like most towns where the main road just kind of goes to the interstate.
Right.
It's way, if you're not familiar with the area, I think there could be a reality TV show where we just place people in Warrenton and see if they can figure out how to get out.
Yeah, seriously.
and I would be entertained.
Yeah.
Okay, so he goes to the casino. Him and his girl ball out for the week and everything. He goes to jail. He gets all these letters and everything. He gets back out. So Caleb, I want to get your opinion on this. They try not to say this in the episode, and they don't say it. They kind of skirt around the fact that he's gotten his life back together. But they don't ever actually say that. As a matter of fact, when they asked Brett Lauderdale about it, he really beats it around the bush. He's like, what does a happy ending look like for Nick Gage? He kind of goes in that direction. What was your thoughts on that?
I think what they were trying to say is it's like he's gotten his life together as far as he's not going around robbing banks and stuff like that, like he did his time and stuff like that. But as far
so he hasn't robbed a bank today, so
exactly or not. But I think what they're referring to with that is, well, but as far as the deathmatch wrestling, well, that's still going on at about, the same speed that he was the first time he was doing it. That part of him has not changed. And he is the current GCW World Champion.
Yeah,
He's
right
currently
now.
their world champion. So he's not just the king of the death match, he's their world champion. And I think that's what Moxley's coming to challenge him for, is that GCW title. Which again, I'm not gonna lie, I'm really looking forward to. I really want to watch that. But yeah, I think that they were just kind of trying to say that, like, it's a happy ending of the fact of he's alive. He still is doing wrestling. He is not blackballed from wrestling or anything like that. Obviously there are still people who want to work with him. So he's not as dangerous as New Jack, was, like, where it was like, no, you know what? The stabbing the guy, we're good with that. That's we're not going to take that kind of risk. But apparently Nick Gage is fine to work with some people, I guess. And like I said, I just think it was more just saying that, like, hey, he's still doing the deathmatch wrestling, and I'm pretty sure he's still taking pain pills. Like, I'm pretty sure he's still dabbles in drugs. Like, he's not clean and sober, basically.
They definitely don't say that.
Yeah. So that's, I don't know if it's beating around the bush, kind of thing. I don't really know what to think of it. Like, I don't know if it's supposed to be oh, well, this guy's a continuously fuck up or whatnot, because I don't think he's that much of a fuck up. I think that he had that one major incident with the bank and stuff like that. But other than that, he's still doing wrestling. So
He was on High Spots on the little video auction thing or whatever they do not
Yeah.
too long ago, and
Yeah.
I watched that, and he seemed like he's got it together. And some people can put it together for the camera, but Nick Gage doesn't really seem like that guy. Nick Gage kind of seems like that's what you get at all times. So I want to talk about two more things before we wrap up. One, him and his brother had a very strained relationship when he gets on drugs. They showed the clip of the match. I believe it was for the CZW title at the time, or it may have been GCW title. And his brother just hits him with his finish, like, right off the rip, and nearly injures him in the process, because he showed up to the show and he was strung out and everything, and then doesn't visit him once when he's in jail. Basically, writes him off. My brother's a criminal. And then his brother eventually commits suicide. And as far as we know from the documentary, they never really made up or anything like that. They never really reconnected. They don't talk about him reconnecting with his brother at all. But they show the clip of him at the indie show, talking about it. And, it seemed like it really ate him up. He talked about, like, the bridge his brother jumped off of is, like, right outside his house. He sees it every day. Joe, what did you think about that whole, like, that series of events? I mean, it's definitely not your, like, Hollywood sort of grow up and become famous fairy tale.
Yeah, it struck me that they said it seemed like the brother had everything together. Nick was the one in trouble, and then later they flip roles and they mentioned the brother having maybe some mental health issues that that were either brushed under the rug or not dealt with or something like that. Even with that, I wouldn't consider Nick Gage a role model in any way. Um, but yeah, it was interesting to see that, and I've heard of families and things like that before where this kid right here, he's the black sheep, and that kid ends up turning out to be the one that's the most successful or whatever, and the one that they have all these expectations for. Again, this probably isn't a good comparison with Nick Gage, but the one they have all these expectations for ends up, going to prison or being a drug addict or whatever else. So yeah, it seems like later in life I kind of want to know more about the brother as a result of this. Just what's the background? He seemed to me a little more serious about the wrestling business than Nick Gage. It seemed like he had a better physique. Um, it seemed like he was more serious about having an actual wrestling match, maybe, as opposed to just a death match. Just from the few clips we saw, I don't know much about the Justice Pain. I don't know much about him, but it was interesting to see them discuss the switch there.
Maybe season 4 we can get a Justice Pain episode of Dark Side of the Ring.
Stovall said something earlier, and I was about to just say, Stovall, sounds like you're expecting a chapter 2 to this later on down the road here. Yeah,
It'd be
Nick Gage
good.
ain't done screwing up,
That's true. He could be the first person to get a sequel, a follow up.
Exactly.
Now, I do want to say, quote of the night is Joe Brown. I don't think Nick Gage is a great role model. Understatement
Captain
of
Obvious.
yeah, understatement of the century. So one more. I want to talk about one last thing before we wrap this up. The obvious thing, the big elephant in the room, the death match with Arquette. Caleb, you have the floor, man. Tell me about the death match with David Arquette.
Well, you know what's interesting about this was I was working with Fox at the time, and that TMZ report, I saw it as it happened on TMZ, and they covered the shit out of that. Like, they were talking about that. First of all, the concept for it to me is so weird. Like, out of everyone you could have thought to put in the ring, you think David Arquette. Like there just wasn't any thought to anyone else. It was, nope, David Arquette. Like, I just I don't know. But he, like David Arquette said, he had no business being in the ring in a death match. If it was a regular matchup with someone who could protect him and make him look good and stuff like that, it would have been fine. But this was a death match that we're talking about. No one looks good in a death match like that. Like, it's impossible to. And then, like I said, it wasn't even on where, Nick Gage comes over with the tubes itself and like busts it over him. That wasn't where he got hurt. Where he got hurt was literally when he turned around and tried to like wrestle him or something like that. And just one of the glass pieces just shot up into his neck. And that's what cut him. But I love how Nick Gage in this episode was just like, he got cut. There wasn't anything leaking or anything like that. Let's continue on with the fucking match. Like it was just no problem to anyone. It's just, oh, he got sliced in the neck. Oh, you're good. We're out walking off.
I think so. I'm kind of torn on it, right? Because on the one aspect, like Nick Gage sat at the table with him, and he was like, "This shit is not fake. This is a death match. There will be glass. I'm gonna hit you for real. Like, it's gonna be nuts." And David Arquette never, like, I don't know if he just got like this, tough guy mentality of like, oh, it's not gonna be that bad. I don't know, man. Like, and I feel like Nick Gage was very, very upfront with him based on what's in the show.
Yeah.
About what was gonna happen. Now, from a wrestling point of view, they did agree that he wasn't gonna cut him. And so he shouldn't have done that, and that's kind of where this thing where I would never trust Nick Gage, I would never book him or want to be in the ring with him, because if he's gonna say something like that, and then go back on it in the match, I mean that kind of betrays like, one of the like core tenets of pro wrestling is that's having that trust in your opponent.
Yeah.
But besides that one aspect, I'm with him on this the whole way. Like, David Arquette had no business being out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's lucky that he did not get permanently, seriously injured in that match. Joe, what did you think about it?
Well, I think Arquette felt like he had a lot to prove still, and that is part of why he wanted to do this. I'm gonna go in the hard way. They don't respect me. Who's the hardest guy I can go up against? Okay, this guy Nick Gage. He cuts people open. You know, I respect Arquette for trying to earn the respect of the business the hard way.
Yeah.
Um, and
Agreed.
Nick Gage even said he respected him. Towards the end there.
Yeah.
But I it was interesting watching that. I had not seen any of that match, so it was really interesting watching them wrestle a little bit and fight a lot.
Although I will say this, if you saw some of the clips, you saw David Arquette snap off that Hurricane Rana and jump off the top turnbuckle. He looked pretty good.
It was
some of
smooth.
that stuff.
It was very smooth, and Nick Gage did speak highly of him.
Yeah.
David Arquette has had some decent matches after his kind of second attempt at wrestling, where he came back and was like, "Hey, I want to actually do this." He's had some good matches. I've seen some of them.
Yeah, and I want to catch that documentary of his "You Can't Kill David Arquette."
Yeah, I want to see that one.
I still have not seen that, but it's up on Hulu, and I want to watch it.
That might be something we could review once the endless downpour of content stops coming out with A&E and Vice constantly raining down new things for us to review.
I know, right?
That being said, guys, I want to wrap this one on up. I do want to highlight a few things on the podcast. We just recently put out the A&E biography, Macho Man Randy Savage review. That has come out. Part 2 of Brian Pillman will be out by the time you see this as well. And then we also are going to be covering, upcoming, we're going to have the A&E biography, Shawn Michaels episode. So there's a ton of stuff coming down the pipe. We're basically doing 2 of these every week, and as long as the A&E WWE Legends biography series is running, which I believe is for 3 more weeks. So there's just a ton of stuff for us to talk about. Joe, thank you for being on here from Suplexes and Microphones. A lot of people are looking forward to you guys coming back and doing some new interviews. So this is the perfect time to catch up on the back catalog that you guys have there of all kinds of excellent interviews that you guys have done over the last, 4 years, is it?
Oh man, I can't even call it. I think it is about 4 years at some point this year. And we mentioned Effie. That's a good one. Caleb, you were involved with us on that one there. And if anybody wants to check it out, everything's at Suplexes Mics. It's all YouTube videos, and they're long. They're in depth. So if you got to do them in bite-sized pieces, go right ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for coming back on the show. Can't wait to have you back on again. And each and every week, of course, I'm joined by none other than Caleb Stovall from the SWN. Thank you, Caleb, as well, for being here tonight.
Yeah, man. And before we wrap up, I know we're only 3 episodes into Dark Side of the Ring, man, but I've got to say this. We were talking about it earlier off air, man. I truly believe that this season is probably been some of their best work ever. I'm truly impressed by what they have been able to show us so far this season. Really, really good.
I have to agree. The next episode, I believe, is Collision in Korea.
Can't wait.
And I'm super excited about that one. So that'll be on the next episode we do. But as far as this episode is concerned, this has been an Evolved Review.